How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, today is a continuation of tomorrow, really meaning that yesterday we learned a Mishnah. That Mishnah was talking about an animal that is deathly ill and is being shechted before it dies. And the Mishnah had given all sorts of signs, jerking this way, jerking that way, bleeding this way, spurting blood that way, of ways of identifying that the animal was killed via shechita rather than just being dead by being sick and dying. Yesterday we were kind of focusing on, well, how do we even know that we're allowed to eat such a sick animal? Okay, we resolved that yesterday. Today we are going to focus on the bloody, deadly aspects of the Mishnah, the how do we know it's really dead and stuff like that. So we are going to discuss signs of a sick animal. What's an indication? How do we know that this animal is deathly ill? How do we identify that this is a deathly ill animal? Right at the end of the Mishnah, we had said that there was a chazaka that this is a deathly ill animal. This is a dangerously ill animal. What are the signs of a dangerously ill animal? And secondly, when the animal needs to jerk around, at what point during the shechita does the animal need to be jerking this way and jerking that way? Friends, that is what we have ahead of us on Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Chullin. Let's go enjoy ourselves and have a great time and learn Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Chullin. Friends, we begin on Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis, about 10 or 12 lines or so from the bottom. How do we identify a dangerously ill animal? Well, if you try to stand it up and it just won't stay standing. Says Rav Chanina bar Shlami in the name of Rav, afilu ocheles bikayos, even if it can eat like chips of wood, which I guess are difficult to chew through, and it's able to chew through those things, that is not an indication of vitality. If it can't stand up, it is dangerously ill. Rami bar Yechezkel Omer, afilu ocheles koros, even if it can chew through, I think, beams of wood, still that is not an indication of vitality. Besura Masniachi. This is how they taught this in Surah, that Rav Yehuda Marav had said it's got to be able to stand up. Rav Chanina bar Shlamya, I talked about the wood chips, and Rabbi Cheskel talked about the wood beams. Now in Pumbedisa Masniachi, in Pumbedisa they explained this very similarly, just that Rav Chanina bar Shlamya was not included. That was just taught together with Rav Yehuda Marav. Heichi dami misukenes. What is an example? How do we identify a dangerously ill animal? Rav Yehuda Marav, kol shemamidin osa ve'eno omedes ba'afilu ocheles b'kayos. If you try to stand it up and it won't stay standing, even if it is eating wood chips, Rabbi Cheskel Amar afilu ocheles koros. Even if it can eat like beams of wood, if it can't stand up, it would be considered dangerously ill. Let me actually just make sure that I'm defining that correctly. Beams. Yeah, there you go. Even if it'll eat through beams, I assume that is beams of wood. Anyways, so if it is unable to stand up, it is dangerously ill. That's the main thing. Ashkachinu Shmuel, the Talmud of the Rab, Shmuel identified, he found some students of Rab Amalu, and he says to them, "My Omer Rab b'misukenes." What did Rab say about a misukenes, about a dangerously ill animal? Amrulei, they said to him, "Hachi Amar Rab." This is what Rab says: "Goa v'tila rei v'shichisha v'kishkisha be'ozna harezo pirkus." So in terms of pirkus, right, so we had talked about yesterday in the Mishnah that when you have this dangerously ill animal, so when you slaughter, you have to look for pirkus. There were different, in the Mishnah we saw a three-way machlokes. Rabban Gamliel had said that it needs to jerk its forearm and its back leg. The Chacham said either or. Rabbi Eliezer was talking about blood gushing out. Rav says that there are other identifiers that there's pirkus, that this animal is alive, meaning that the animal was alive and died from the shchita and it was a kosher shchita. Goa, that it's, what does Rashi say? So ekes, it's like yelling out. So I saw in two of the, I mentioned yesterday that I was watching a whole bunch of YouTube videos. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos about watching a Pakistani woman slaughter goats in her yard. And I think in two of the videos, so not in all of the videos, but in two of the videos, I think the animal was like kind of like, and so that would be an indication that the animal was alive at the time of shechita, as opposed to, again, we're talking about a dangerously ill animal, so maybe it died before the shechita. But if it's like kind of making, I don't know what the word is for that. Let's just call it baying. Like, I don't know. I'll just say like, that it was kind of similar to that. Veitila rei, or if it defecates, then that's also an indication that it is alive. Didn't see that in any of the videos. The kishkisha be'ozna, or it was like moving around, flapping around its ears. Harezo pirkus, these would all be examples of pirkus. Amrlu, Shmuel says to them, it's trichale la'aba, Abba, who is a reference to Rav. So Rashi says, why is Abba a reference to Rav? It was out of honor. Shmuel called Rav Abba out of honor. Tosfos quotes from the Aruch that actually his name was actually Abba. And they called him Rab, just like Rabbi Yehuda Anasi is referred to as Rebbe. So Rab was referred to as Rab because of his greatness. But his name was actually Abba. So it's a machlekes. Rashi says that he called him Abba because of his greatness. Tosfos quotes the Aruch, who says that that Abba was his actual name, and Rav was just a way that they would refer to him in respect. Anyways, so it's tzrichale le'Abba le'azuze une. Shmuel says to the students of Rav really required for pirkus that the animal move its ears. That's quite a lot of alive. That seems more than necessary, because I guess goat ears and stuff, I guess depends on the animal, but goat ears I guess are kind of like floppy, so it would have to like be have particular vitality to be flopping its ears. She'ani omer, because I say, says Shmuel, kol she'eno divarim shamisa ose, as long as it is not the things that just a regular death would do, that would be enough. So meaning, as the Mishnah pointed out, as we learned in the Mishnah yesterday, as we're going to learn now, for example, when a goat or a sheep dies, apparently, like if it just dies on its own, it would extend it would just extend one of its forearms. It wouldn't kind of jerk around or then pull it back in. It would just extend it. That would be like a standard not shchita, but if it like was an avela, if it died on its own, it would do that. So if you shecht this misukenes and it just extends its forearm, well, that would not be an indication. That would be right a devarim she hamisa osa. That would be considered something that just a standard death does. Ma'ininu devarim she hamisa osa. So what is that? Amar Rav Anan says Rav Anan ledidi mafar shalim mine demar Shmuel. That's explained to me about Shmuel. Haisa yada kifufa ufa shatsa. That if its leg was bent and it extended the leg, davar she hamisa osa, that would be just kind of a standard thing that would be like a standard dying thing, not a shchita thing. Pshuta v'kafifa dvarim she'ein amisa osa. Now, if it was already extended and then it bent its leg, that would not be a standard misa thing, and that would be an indication of a proper shchita. My kamash b'lantanino. What is the chiddush over here? We already knew this from our Mishnah yesterday. Be'emadaka, that when it comes to a be'emadaka, like a goat or a sheep, shepashta yada v'lo echzira, that we said in the Mishnah yesterday, if it extended its hand but did not bend it back in, psula, that is psula. She'ena elo tzoas nefesh, because that's just a standard death thing. Ha'echzira, but if it brought it back in, kshera. So how is that any different than what Rav Anan was just saying from Shmuel? So imi masnizin ava amina davka kaifa upashta v'ader kaifala. Well, if we only had our Mishnah, I would think from our Mishnah that davka, if it was bent and then extended and then bent again, then it would be kosher. Aval pashta v'kafafta, but if it was already extended and then it bent it low, maybe that would not be an indication of vitality. Kamash malan. So therefore, what we are learning from Shmuel is that even if it was already extended and then bent it inward, then that is enough of a indication of that it was from the shchita. And as I mentioned yesterday, I saw that in one of the videos of the Pakistani woman that it was totally after like the goat, his neck was like ripped open and totally bled out and everything, but it was still like bending and extending it's like arms and legs and stuff, just bending it, extending it, bending it, extending it. So yeah, I got to kind of see what that is. If you want links to these videos, just let me know. And I'll find them for you if you're interested in it. Meizvei, we have a contradiction. Rabbi Yossi Omer says Rabbi Yossi, Reb Meir Omer, that Reb Yossi says that Reb Meir would say Goa b'shal shchita, that if it's a at the time of shchita, ein zeh pirkus, that is not pirkus. Reb Elazar Reb Yossi Omer says Reb Elazar Reb Yossi Mishmo, in the name of Reb Yossi, afilu itila rei, even if it defecated, the kiskisa biznava, and wagged its tail, ein zeh pirkus, it is not pirkus. Kasha goa agoa, kasha rei arei. So this is a problem because Rav had said that the ing is enough, and Reb Meir says that it's not enough. And Rav had said that defecating is enough, and Reb Yossi had said it is not enough. So goa agoa lo kasha, when it goes like is not a problem. Ha de avikala or de amikala, depends. If it had like a strong, kind of like a healthy voice, so then that is an indication that it was alive. Like in the videos that I saw, it was a healthy voice. It was a healthy voice going So that would be a kosher shchita. But if it was just kind of like a kind of shvach voice, so then it wouldn't be kosher. Rei arei nami lo kasha. Also, defecation is not a question. Kan b'shoses, kan be matrezes. That it depends. If it was just kind of leaking out, a leaky defecation, so then it wouldn't really be so exciting. It wouldn't be an indication so much of a proper shchita. But if it was like chazak, so then it would be an indication that the animal was alive and it was a proper shchita. And now, essentially, for the rest of the daf, we will discuss at what point during the shchita the animal needs to jerk around. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda says, Rav Chisda, pirkus she'amru, the jerking around, besof shchita, that is at the end of the shchita. Let's go weiter. My besof shchita be'emsa shchita. What does the end of the shchita mean? It means the middle of the shchita. La'afuke trila shchita, as opposed to the beginning of the shchita below, that it wouldn't work. Now, okay, so what did Rav Chisda just say? He says that the jerking around that we're talking about, it happens at the end of the shchita, not in the middle of the shchita. Now, I was wondering, like, doesn't shchita all happen super fast? Like, in the shchita that I saw of the shaychet, it was like instant, super fast. So I went to one of the local shuls, because I didn't know I was going to get an answer. I figured, let me go to one of the local Batei Medrash, see if I could find one of the local Talmidei Chacham who gives a Daf Yomi shir, and I can ask them. I found somebody who doesn't give a Daf Yomi shir, so he wasn't, really on top of it in the same way. But I asked him nonetheless. I figured this was like a general enough question I could mention it. Anyways, so I asked him, like, isn't the shchita like instant? Like, what does it mean? Beginning of the shchita, middle of the shchita? Dude, the shchita I saw was like instant. There was no middle or end or beginning. It was quick. But at the same time, he pointed out that we learned the other day, for example, you could theoretically shech throughout the whole day. If you have a dull knife, it could take the whole day, right? So I think maybe the answer is that, yeah, look, I mean, it's true. In practice, at least shchita, right? At least the shchita I saw, and I think that's probably indicative of. I think generally we do shchita as quickly as possible. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I don't think that we saw anywhere that a shchita has to be instant. We did see that it could theoretically take all day. So I guess if we also talk about like you slice through the kana and then you do some stuff and you get back to the veshet, I don't know, whatever. So what were we saying? I was saying, so it could be that like, I mean, you just have to make sure, there's no violation of Shia. There was also another video that I saw, which was interesting. This was like a shaykhet. It seems they brought it to some summer camp. I don't think any of the summer camps I went to, they had shchita as an activity. This must have been a Haimish summer camp. I mean, it was like a Chabad summer camp. So I guess they thought to bring a shaykhet for the day. Okay, why not? Anyways, that was pretty interesting. So he was talking, the shaykhet there was actually talking about the different psuls of shchita, like shehiyah and drasa and all that stuff. It was amazing to hear from a shaykhet. It's a little bit different than you would think. I could send you the link to that. Let me know if you want these links and stuff. I don't know. I haven't been sharing the links in the WhatsApp group. I don't know how many I don't know how graphic we want the YouTube links to be. But if you want them, message me at WhatsApp and I'll post it to the group. Anyway, so this was actually maybe I should just post this one anyways. I don't know. This was actually a very informative video. It was basically the shaykhet speaking to a bunch of kids at a summer camp, but he was talking about real life kind of shehiyah. When it comes to a chicken or something, shehiyah is basically instant. I mean, you kill a chicken instantly. And drasa, what it means to press down. Chalada was interesting. Ikur, how he talked about ikur. So anyways, if you want the video, that's interesting as well. Anyways, right, because we were talking about it being instant. So, but I guess it doesn't have to be instant. So if you're doing more like a slower shchita, so I guess you could, maybe that's what it's saying. If it's like a slower shchita, maybe then there is a beginning of the shchita and a middle of the shchita and an end of a shchita. And at what point is the animal jerking around? Now remember, the point of the animal jerking around is an indication of vitality. How much vitality was there in this animal? Because there's a concern, since it's dangerously ill, that maybe it died not from the shchita. It died right before you shechted it. So we're looking for indications that no, it didn't die just before you shechted it. You shechted it. So let's read this again. Rav Chizda says of Chizda, Pirkos she'amru, when they were talking about jerking around, besov shchita, it's at the end of the shchita. Okay? My besov shchita be'emtza shchita, but says Rav Chizda, the truth is that means in the middle of the shchita. It doesn't have to be all the way at the end of the shchita, because that's a little bit of a bigger chiddush, right? Meaning if you're saying that at the end of the shchita it needs to be jerking around, then that's it's holding on for longer. So he says, no, it's actually the middle of the shchita. If at the middle of the shchita it's jerking around, then that's acceptable. But if at the beginning of the shchita it's jerking around, that's not enough. I guess it could have still just died on its own. But if mid shchita it's still jerking around, so then that's an indication of vitality and that it's a kosher shchita. Amar Rav Chizda says of Chizda, how do I know this? The Tanan that we learned in our Mishnah, Behema Daka Sheposhta Yada V'Lechzira Psula, that in our Mishnah we said that if a Behema Daka, like a sheep or a goat, extends its hand but does not bend it back in, it's Psula. And I'm going to add some words here. But if it bent back, right? If it extended the arm and bent it back in, it's kshera. Amos, when is it doing this? When is it, right? You've already at least began the shchita, and now this. Let's talk about a goat. So this goat extends its arm and it bends it back in. So it says of Chizda, if we're expecting this to happen at the end of the shchita. And again, I mean, it could be just talking about shchita that's not instant. I don't know. Kol eichi tesi v'tesa. How long do you expect this animal to still be jerking around for? Right? If you're going to say that it's the end of shchita, yeah, how long do you expect there to be vitality and that's still at the end of the shchita? It still needs to be jerking around. Therefore, Rav Chisda concludes that if it's jerking around in the middle of the shechita, that's an indication of enough vitality to conclude that it's a kosher shechita. Amali Rava, but Rava disagrees. La'olam besov shechita. No, it's talking about the end of the shechita. At the end of the shechita, if it's extending its arm and bending it in, you see in the video I saw, I did this quite a few times. It wasn't like a one-time thing. But maybe this is a dangerously ill animal. Maybe just once is enough. But I mean, by all animals, maybe once is enough. But maybe we're talking about once by a dangerously ill animal. But anyways, the animal I saw, it was bending and extending quite a few times. Shani Omer kol she'eno osaken basof. That Rava argues that if an animal is incapable of bending and extending at the end of the shechita, biyadua. If at the end of the shechita it's unable to jerk, then it must have died before the shechita. Again, in the video that I saw, it was really jerking around for quite a while after it had already been its neck was wide open and totally bled out and everything. It was very much dead. And yet it was still kind of jerking around for a little while, a few minutes probably. So says Rava, no. If after the shechita it's not still able to jerk around, then it was already dead. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omer says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, pirkus she'amu b'tchila shechita. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, however, argues that the pirkus is happening at the beginning of the shechita. But notice, however, pay attention to how he defines pirkus, however. He does not define it as jerking the arms and legs. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak min Aminallah says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, how do I know this? It's not that we learned in our Mishnah. Reb Shimon said, Reb Shimon, hashoichet balayla, that if a person slaughters at night, ulemachar matzah ksalim leim dam, and the next day he finds that the walls are filled with blood, kishera, the shechita is kosher, shezinka, because that's an indication that there was blood gushing out of the animal's neck. Ukamidas Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer had defined pirkus, that we're looking for a gushing and squirting of blood. V'amar Shmuel, and says Shmuel, kosle beis shchita shaninu, and says Shmuel that we are talking about the walls of the neck, of where the neck was sliced through. So if a person slaughters at night and he comes back the next day and the neck where the shechita happened was very, very, very bloody, so then that is an indication that the blood flowed stark, and like Rabbi Eliezer defines it, that it's based on the blood flow rather than the jerking. Now, so if you say that the beginning of shechita is already acceptable, then great. But if you say that no, this has to happen at the end of the shechita, dilma betchilas shechita zinka, maybe it was flowing, gushing with blood at the beginning of the shechita. Meaning, it says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, this whole thing, a person slaughters at night and he comes back the next day and he's having a look at the neck and he's saying, okay, it's all bloody, but how's he supposed to know? Was it gushing with blood at the beginning of the shechita, in the middle of the shechita, at the end of the shechita? It's a bloody neck. How do you know if it profusely bled at the beginning or the middle or at the end? There's no indication. So from the fact that Reb Shimon says he can come back the next day and have a look at the neck, and if it's very, very bloody, then that's good enough, then that is good enough regardless of, even though we have no way to know if it was bleeding at the beginning, in the middle, or the end. Rashi points out that that this is specifically according to the way that Shmuel defines it, that the co-cells, the walls that we're talking about, are the walls of the neck. Because if we're actually talking about the walls of the room that it's in, well, you could actually see based on where the spraying happened, right? If the spraying is happening higher up on the wall, well, then that would have been earlier in the shechita. If it's happening lower down on the wall, then that would have been later on in the shechita. But anyways, okay, fine. It says the Gemara, "V'dilma shiny zinuk de odif." But wait a second. Maybe though Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak you're specifically talking about the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, who defines pirkus as the gushing of the blood. So yeah, if you define pirkus as the gushing of the blood, so I can understand why you would conclude that it can even be at the beginning of the shchita, because if we're going based on the gushing of the blood, yeah, there will be a really strong gushing of blood, and it will be a really strong indication of vitality at the beginning of the shchita. But we can't necessarily apply that to, let's say, the opinions that are talking about jerking. Right? Dilma's shani zinuk, maybe shinuk is different to adif. That is a really strong indication of vitality, and therefore even at the beginning of the shchita it would be good, because it would be a lot of vitality then. Umi adif, one second, is the gushing of blood really better than the jerking options? But we learn in our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Daya im Zinka. Rabbi Eliezer says it's enough if it gushes with blood, implying that it's a less strong indication that it was alive. It's enough if it's gushing with blood. You don't need the jerking around. The blood is enough. So says the Gemara, look, Kal midur ben Gamliel, sure, while it's true that the blood may be a weaker indication than Rabbi Gamliel, who requires both the jerking of the hands and the legs, or a hand and a leg, but it is nonetheless stronger than the indication of the rabbis who said either an arm or a leg is enough. Ravina says, Ravina, Amrli Sama bar Ilkoi, says Ravina that Sama bar Ilkoi said to me, Akshiba Avua de bar Abuvram, that the father of the son of Abuvram, i.e. Abuvram himself, said Va'amrila, and some say Achua de bar Abuvram, the brother of bar Abuvram. Umidrabanan mi adif, they asked, is the blood actually, right? We said that the blood gushing is kind of somewhere in the middle in terms of indications of vitality. Not as much as Rabbi Gamliel, who requires the hand and a leg, but more than the rabbis who require a hand or a leg. But is it really a stronger indication? We learned in our Mishnah, ad shetifarkes, o biyad, o beregel, that the Chacham say, no, it's not enough. You need to have jerking of either the arm or the hand. Now, Rabbanon Aheya Kaimu, what are they referring to? If they're commenting on Rabbi Gamliel, pirkisa mibaile. If the rabbis are commenting on Rabbi Gamliel was more machmir. He said you need a hand and a leg. They're saying you need either a hand or a leg. So they shouldn't say no. It should say then kevon, right? Meaning Rabbi Gamliel says you need a hand and a leg. They should have said no, you don't need a hand and a leg. Once you have a hand or a leg, it should be enough. That's what they should have said. But in fact, they said no, it needs to. Until it can't be that they're commenting on Rabbi Gamliel. Elab shita ad Rabbi Eliezer. Rather, they must be commenting on Rabbi Eliezer. V'yadif my ad. Meaning, it must be that they're commenting on Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said that the gushing of the blood is an indication of vitality, and the rabbis are saying, no, it isn't. Ad, shatifar, whatever. No, that's not enough. It needs to jerk an arm or a leg, implying that Rabbi Eliezer is actually the lowest level of vitality. The rabbis are saying, no, that's not enough. You need to jerk either an arm or a leg, and Rabbi Gamliel says it needs to be an arm and a leg. Rave Omar says, Rave, Pirkus she'amu b'sov shchita. Rave had said that the jerking around is at the end of the shchita. Amar Rave min aminala Titania. Says Rave, how do I know this, that the jerking is at the end? The Titania that we learn in the Bible says, sure, O Kesef. Right, we learn from the positive, right? Sure, O Kesef, O Eis, Ki, Yivalid v'haya shivas yom tachas imo miyom hashmini v'hala yiratzu l'korban shel Hashem. Right, there's a pasuk that talks about that when a animal is born, if you want to offer it as a korban, you have to wait until, you can't offer it until the 8th day of its life. Now says the Gemara, right, sure, O Kesef, that when the pasuk says a ox or a sheep, pradli kilayim, to the extension, to the exclusion of a animal that is a combination of, let's say, a sheep and a goat, like a sheet or a goat. O'ez, when it says O'ez, prat lenidme, you can't offer as a korban a goat that looks like a sheep, right? If you have a big a goat boy and a goat girl, and they have a baby goat, but it looks like a sheep, you can't offer that as a korban. Ki yivaled prat liyotzei dofen. When it says ki yivaled, to the exclusion of yotzei dofen. Now there is something important to point out about yotzei dofen. It's going to be important in a few minutes. That yotzei dofen also comes to exclude from bringing as a korban an animal whose mother died during childbirth, before it was born. Its mother died before it was born, because the assumption is a C-section can result, right? Sometimes it can result in the death of the mother, right? You're opening up the mother to cutting open the mother to take out the baby, and it can result in the death of its mother. So therefore, when it says ki valed prat liyotzei dofen, also included in ki valed is that an animal whose mother died before it was born, or while birthing it, or whatever, before it was born, and so that animal cannot be offered as a korban. Shivas yomim, when it says 7 days, prat li mechusar zman, not before then. If it's less than 7 days old, it cannot yet be offered as a korban. Tachas imo prat li yasim. When it says tachas imo, it's to the exclusion of a yasim, of an orphan animal. The question is, what does it mean? Ha yasim echidami. What is this orphan animal? Ilema di yilid say ime. Mesa. If this orphan animal that cannot be offered as a korban is an animal that was born, and then after it was born, its mother died. What's wrong with that? That's a kind of normal, like that happens. The olam teichi v'teisa, what do you expect the animal's mother to live forever? It's not crazy that the animal's mother died. Living things die. There's nothing wrong with that. And therefore, if the animal is born and then later its mother dies, there's no reason why it can't be offered as a korban. Okay, so what is this orphan korban then? Orphan animal. The mesa v'haler v'adu yilidte. Well, maybe it's talking about that it died before the baby was born. Michi yivalid nafka. But as I pointed out a minute ago, that we learned out from ki yivaled prat liyotzei dofen, which includes a scenario where the mother died before the baby was born. So ela pshita, what therefore is the scenario of an orphan? Again, we said it's not talking about where it was born and then the mother died, and it's not talking about where the mother died before it was born. Rather, ze perish lemisa v'ze perish l'chaim. It's talking about when the mother died b'diyuk, when the baby was born. Mamish at that time, and we're saying that it is excluded, right? We said tachas imo prat liyasum. It excludes this scenario. So whether the mother died before the baby was born, whether the mother died while the baby was born, as the baby was born, in either scenario, the baby cannot be offered, the child cannot be offered as a korban. Now, I amrat bishlama ba'inon chayusa bisof leda. So I understand if we say, well, the requirement that this mother be alive throughout the birth, it needs to be alive until mamish the end of the birth. It can't die before then. So I need the itzrich kralamute. That's why we need the pasuk to exclude it from tachas imo. Let's go weiter. Eli omart loba inon chayusa besof leda. But if you say that it doesn't need to be alive at the end of the birth, it could be dead even before then. The mother could be dead before then. Lama li michi yivalid nafka. Well, that's not from ki yivalid. So I understand if we say that the mother mamish needs to be alive up until the point when the baby is born, then I understand why we need to learn it out from tachas imo, and it can't be learned out from ki yivaled. And therefore, we see, so we want to conclude from there that just like in this scenario, where we say that the mother needs to be alive throughout the birth, right? Well, Rashi says it well. Rashi says, right, Shmamina, I'm reading from a Rashi, I don't know, maybe 15 lines before it gets wide. Kol milsa deba'u ba rabban chayusa, that whenever the rabbis require something to be alive, It needs to still be alive at the end. In this case, the mother needs to be alive until the baby is born. And in terms of shchita, argues Rava, this would indicate that the animal needs to be alive until the end of the shchita. And at that point is when it flops around and jerks. Amar Rava says, Rava Hilchasa, and this is the halacha. Kiyomas Nisa is like the following brisa. Behema, you can skip the next word. Shapashta yada v'lo echzira psula. If you have an animal that extended its hand, but did not bend it back in afterwards, it is psula. When is this biyad? That's specific to the hand, however. Aval beregel, in terms of the leg, that doesn't matter. Bein pashta v'lo kfafa, whether it extended its leg and then didn't bend it back in. Bein kfafa v'lo pashta, or whether it bent the leg but didn't extend it afterwards. Kshera, either by the leg, either way is kosher. And this is specifically by bein madaka, aval begasa, bein bayad, bein beregel. But when it comes to a bein magasa, whether we're talking about the hand, whether we're talking about the leg, bein pashta v'lo kfafa, whether it extended the leg and then didn't bend it back, bein kfafa v'lo pashta, whether it bent it but then didn't extend it. Kshera, either way, any kind of movement of the leg or of the arm would be acceptable. The off, when it comes to a bird, afilo rifref ella gapo, even if it only like flapped a wing or something, v'lo kishkesh, and didn't elas navo, and only kind of moved its tail, harezeh pirkus, that would be significant enough for a bird. Tanani, what's the chiddush of this brisa? Didn't we learn all of this in our Mishnah? That when the Mishnah says a behemadaka that extended its arm and did not bend it back, psula she'ena ela otzaas nefesh, because that is, if it only extended its arm, that's just kind of a regular, any animal that just kind of dies on its own would do that. It's an indication of shchita. Yad in regalo. This is specifically the arm that the Mishnah mentioned, not the leg. Daka in gasalo, and specifically bema daka, not as bema gasa. Of it's trichale dilo tanan. Enochinami. Your points are valid. The chiddush of the brisa is when it comes to birds. The Mishnah hadn't said anything about birds. Friends, that was Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Chullin. On Daf 38 of Masechta Chullin, we discussed signs that an animal is sick. Rav had mentioned that if it can't stand up, so then it is sick. And even if it can like bite through wood and stuff, if it can't stand up, it is sick. We then discussed different kind of indications of pirkus. Rav had mentioned if the animal is screaming or excrementing or wagging the ears. Shmuel said anything that is sort of not a standard death being if it just extends its arm. Anything else, like if it extends its arm and bends it back in, that would be an indication that it was a proper shchita. When the animal needs to jerk around, Rav Chizda says in the middle of shchita. Rav Chizda says that this jerking around needs to be in the middle of the shchita, not at the end. Rava says no, it davka does need to be at the end of the shchita. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says it can even be at the beginning of the shchita, but that was specifically because he was talking about the blood squirting. And as Rav Shimon pointed out, you can even check the next day to see if the neck is full of blood, and therefore there's no indication by looking at the neck to know did it get full of blood at the beginning of the shchita, middle of the shchita, end of the shchita. We just know now that it's full of blood. Therefore, even at the beginning of the shchita would be fine, according to Rav Nachman Yitzchak. Friends, that was Daf 38, Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Chullin. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Cheers.